is Mike Lucen. I'm the Dean for the Zuellig School for Development Management here at AIM. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Institute for this event, which is the first for 2015, the first of our Development at Work series for 2015. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our guests from Asian Development Bank who are going to present, and I will introduce them shortly. Let me say a little bit about the Development at Work series here. We started this series 4 years ago with the idea that development practitioners and professionals doing work in the field would come in and share what they're doing with us here at AIM. We're a school of management, a graduate school of management. And it's important, the word management is important in a number of ways, but what we are particularly focused on is not just academic learning. We want academic learning in development and business to have real-world application. And what's important for us in the School for Development Management is to connect what we teach in the classroom to what is actually happening out there in the field. And the Development at Work series was designed precisely to bring to the campus development professionals doing real-world work. And much of the work that is being presented is not just research, it's also work that is being applied. While today's presentation is focused on a particular piece of work done by the Asian Development Bank, and you have the final report, or you have the report with you, much of what we feature in Development at Work is actually work in progress. And one of the things that we think is important is, even if it's work in progress, even if it's work that is still not completed but is in the process, there's much to be learned from that process. And we've had a wide range of topics presented. For example, the very first Development at Work presentation that was done here was done by a human rights lawyer from Cambodia who was talking about what is the importance of the Khmer Rouge Tribunal and the cases that were being pursued in Cambodia. We've had political activists, we've had researchers come and talk about conditional cash transfers. We do it in person and we do it connected online. An example of that was when the microfinance crisis was in India was particularly salient. We tied up with the Microfinance Research Institute in Andhra Pradesh, and we did it online. So the discussions that we had was a blend of people in this room talking among themselves, including microfinance professionals, but also connecting to a resource group in India. So we do all kinds of things to try to bring content that we think is relevant to development into the classroom. And we're particularly pleased today that Asian Development Bank has asked us to organize this small gathering to talk about new work that they have done and which they have commissioned on the topic advancing the knowledge-based economy. So what they're presenting today is what you have in front of you, the full report on Innovative Asia, Advancing the Knowledge-Based Economy. And you should have 3 hard copy reports. The first is the full report, the second are case studies from selected countries, and the third is that index which they commissioned the Economic Intelligence Unit to put together for them. It's important work in a sense because it begins to start informing us of where we need to go as we try to move ahead And I think what's important for ADB, and it's important in our context, is we're not just talking about our individual countries and trying to move ahead. We're really talking now about how we're so connected to the rest of the region that, in effect, the connectedness is an equally important part of the equation. Okay, so they will have a chance to, well, they will be the ones to tell us, to present to us all of this. So let me end my welcome remarks here and invite Mr. Bindu Lohani, the Vice President, Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development of the Asian Development Bank to give his address. Bindu, please.
Well, thank you very much, Dean Luz, Mr. Ibrahim, Suraj, Shanti. I see a lot of common friends here, Srini, Sitaram, a lot of others. Thank you for the opportunity. I used to be at the Asian Institute of Technology, which is your technology counterpart in Bangkok, when US decided to establish a equivalent of Harvard in Asia. That was Asian Institute of Management, and the MIT equivalent was the AIT. So I spent 10 years out there. I've been here a couple of times in the past to talk, including this hall, I think 7 times. But I haven't been back. It's really nice to be back. Nice to be back to talk to you and share some of our findings. This was a study we thought we will do it because such a study wasn't done. And I'll tell you the reason why we had to do this study. So first, when you want to try to do a work of this type, you generate certain hypotheses, and then we need some really prominent people to tell us whether we're thinking right or whether we're concluding right. So we assembled a group of prominent people to be our advisory group. We had Professor Larry Summers, who doesn't need introduction. He was the former Harvard professor. We had Kishore Mehbubani from Lee Kuan Yew School. They were co-chair. Then we have Dominic Barton, Suraj McKinsey Company Global CEO. We put together Mr. Kamath from ICICI, the chairman, current chairman, in the past the president and CEO. We had Dr. Han, former Prime Minister of Korea. We have Justin Lin, Chief Economist of the World Bank. So we assembled these really, we thought, very prominent people so that we can ask tough questions and take decisions on them. I think that group was very, very valuable. So what I'm going to do is quickly take 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe to give you a quick view on our studies, and Shanti can later elaborate on the details, finding, etc. I'm going to start a little, which way? Press this way? Okay. Can't see it, put it this way. I'm going to do 4 things with you. First, I'm going to give you a little bit about what, in our view, what Asia going to look like in 2050. I think it's nice to know, 50 years from now, it's anybody's guess, but it's good to guess. And it's good to see what we think might happen, therefore start preparing for it. I may not be there 50 years later, but all of you will be there, so it's important for you. Second, some of the structural transformation in Asia that we see, which is happening in the right direction, which is not happening in the right direction, as we see. Third, then I'm going to come to this study and talk a little bit, take the opportunity to say 1 or 2 words about knowledge management and Asian Development Bank. So we did this study, just like this one, we did a study called Asia 2050, realizing the Asian century, how it looked like, and quickly giving you that information. If you went back, if you look at the 18th century, I don't think you were born, even I wasn't born in the 18th century, but 18th century, Asia accounted for roughly 60% of the world economy. Today, what is it? About 15% or 28%. But it had come down as low as 15% back in 1950. Then again, it caught up. Now we are in 28% of the global GDP. Based on this study, what we see that Asia has the potential to have more than 50% of the global GDP. We say here 52%. And it has the reason GDP per capita in terms of the PPP terms could be as high as $40,000 per capita, which is again 52% of the GDP, right? Given that scenario, it's a very positive scenario, and some of the countries which will drive this are there. But more interesting is, it is not automatically given. You know, to achieve that 52% of the global economy, Asia does have a lot of challenges. Not only challenges, we call them mega challenges, huge challenges. One is addressing inequities and disparities. You all know the rich and white gap between the rich and white. The rich is getting richer, poor is getting poorer. Even when big opportunity in Asia came in, it were the same people who were already on the job, who got better jobs, but the people were left behind. So disparity is very wide. Not only disparities within the country, the disparities across the countries. And that could create all kind of problems, especially if you take Asian Economic Community. By 2015, it will be one community. You see lots of disparity within the country. It could have various kind of implications, movement of the labor, skills, etc. And you might lose out in the process. The third is avoiding the middle income trap. What we have seen is it's easy to come up to be a middle income country. And that's where you could get trapped. How to go into the high-end economy, how to become like an OECD country. Fourth, the competition for finite resources. There's only so much resources available, and that is, everybody's competing for the same resources. That is becoming globally, and certainly it would mean in Asia, because we have huge countries like China, we have India, Indonesia. These are the three of the four largest populous country in the world. The challenges brought to us by the global warming, climate change. I don't know how much you've been following. The GDP loss in South Asia could be of the order of about 8% by 2100. If you're growing 6%, if you're about to lose 8%, I don't think you're growing. In Southeast Asia, our study shows about 5.7. So it is a huge challenge, no matter how you look at it. And the last challenge, mega challenge, to is urbanization. Asia has, in fact, the whole world has never seen the kind of urbanization that is happening in Asia. By 2050, we expect up to 60 to 70% of the Asians will be living in cities. Big cities like Manila and secondary cities, which are going to be the future growth center. One of the McKinsey study, since my friend here I can mention, they basically says, you know, the future growth is going to come from secondary cities. This big cities like Manila, Bangkok, etc., they have their fair and good share. It will come, it will have growth, but the future would be the secondary city. This is what Mr. Ibrahim and I were talking just a few minutes ago, the importance of focusing on the secondary cities. And so I'm saying all of this to say, if we fail in managing these challenges, we will be, our prediction is you will have only about 31 or 32% of the GDP. And growing from 28% today to 31% by 2050, to me, is a trap. That means you haven't grown at all. So Asia is really at a very critical situation at the moment. And to strengthen this point, I would like to show you this. Look at this today. Here's the middle income line, approximately $12,000 per capita. ADB puts it somewhere here, but this is the real number. In the history, if you look at it, most of the countries, most of our countries have still been below this line. India, Indonesia, China, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Sri Lanka, they all are below middle income. But they will make it here. Our view is it's no problem. But in the history of development, it's only Singapore, this curve, and it's the Korea which has really done extremely well and broken this middle income trap. Korea in the last 40 years is a remarkable story from being developing countries to an OECD developed country. When I was in the bank, I still remember providing loan, working a loan project to Korea. Today, Korea is a donor. If you go back to 1960s, the Philippine GDP was next to only Japan. And look at how the Korea moved up. So there have been countries who had to struggle. And the reason for showing this is we believe all of these countries will make it here by 2020. But the challenge is how to get there. And it is in that context we did the study. This is where OECD countries are. And our study is, if you want to go into this OECD curve, one way to do that would be you would need some major thinking change, major mindset change, and be in this kind of economy called knowledge-based economy. That's the basis for doing the study. And here, let me show you, in the context of development, focusing just on the industries and the manufacturing, it is very clear that in the early stage, most countries are agriculture, we know that. Even today, the whole of Asia, if you take a look at it, 40% are employed in agriculture. Then they go to simple manufacturing. They go to then some supply chain manufacturing, SME, FDIs coming. The biggest challenge is here, how to really, when the FDIs come, how to internalize and you are able to absorb that technology and make it internal so that you can do that all by yourself. Now I can tell you many countries who are trying to be here, but they have taken a black box approach, like FDIs will come in, you can export, but it's a black box. You are not able to absorb that technology within the country, so as a result you constantly are dependent upon the FDI and outside technology. And one country which is internalized done is really Korea. Korea took a decision to say we must be able to do this ourselves. And they invested and that paid off in the IT sectors. And, that's for another day. It's in the report, by the way. You can take a look. And as you move up higher, we see now the most creativity and innovative areas. There's a lot to do here for most of the Asian countries, including some of the OECD countries. One quick chart on the structural transformation. And if you look at today, how in the document you will see the OECD countries. In the early days, there were countries in OECD which were 100% agriculture, but then they have become completely zero agriculture also. But in Asia today, about 40% still agriculture is still the largest. About 700 million people are still working. But based on one of our study, we look at the output through manufacturing and the employment in that. And without getting too much into it, if you look at some of the countries, there are countries who have yet to industrialize enough for getting the right output and the right employment. There are countries who have done enough, but they need to deindustrialize, move into something in a higher end, in the earlier chart I showed you, and there are countries which did not industrialize at all. So these are deindustrializing, they have deindustrialized somewhat, they need to deindustrialize, move into higher end. Countries which have not enough industrialized for getting the kind of output and which did not industrialize for the employment. So the employment and the output indicators for doing this, for structural transfer. And this is happening quite a bit. In the case of OECD countries, and that's the benchmark we've used for all our studies, the manufacturing output and employment back in the 70s was almost about 25% of the GDP. Now today they are about to half. What did they do? They move on into the service sector. And that's what most of the Asian countries are wanting to be. The previous chart, if you had looked at it carefully, We can see Philippine service sector is very high, but if you start analyzing why 58%, I think it is, we still have a lot of room in the service sector. On the high-end service sector, we need to move into high-end. Okay, with that in background, this study, for this study we have taken the same definition as what OECD countries use it. Take the 4 pillars. To be in the knowledge economy, you need to have these 4 pillars. One, you must have an economic incentive and institutional regime, which is the role of the government in most cases. The systems of education and skill, IT, effective ICT, and the R&D and innovation. These are the 4 pillars we have taken, and these are the 4 pillars because we can compare with the OECD country. Today, if you look at most technologically advanced countries, if not all, are truly knowledge-based, and the use of the knowledge being the key to wealth generation in these countries. For example, major OECD countries where more than 50% of the GDP are knowledge-related prove this point. And there are data again in the report. So what are the success stories in building knowledge economies? I mentioned already Korea, so I don't need to mention it, but a few indicators, few messages coming out from the report, and again it's in the report, is the importance of R&D, research and development for innovation. Most of the countries are still 1%, below 1%. The really OECD countries, good ones, spend 4-5%. All our Asian countries are far, far behind. China is about 2+. Important of having a super ministry. I mean, in the case of Korea, science and technology and IT, they started really creating that from the top. I do remember when they established KAIST, Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, they were still borrowing money to do that, and they proved it right. Role of the government I mentioned, and this interestingly, since Korea wanted to do move into manufacturing, construction, and engineering like shipbuilding to IT, at one time 35% of all the Korean tertiary graduates were in engineering, manufacturing, construction. Now this is meaning if you want to go to that route, you need to train the people at that level. If you say I'm going to go to the high end of the IT, then you're going to have to start preparing people in that sector. As simple as that, but it's a coordinated planning that will be required. Similarly in Singapore, if you see early days of Singapore, 60s, labor intensive to skill intensive, then they went to technology intensive, now they're moving into knowledge and innovation economy. Again, you see the research R&D budget is increasing to almost 2.3%. They also had a very strong role of the government, always in all sectors, including this one. And their new target is to be a hub, knowledge hub in many areas. The Finland is another example. Finland, the reason I put Finland is 1950s, it was a totally agriculture-based economy. And today you look at it, it's a different story. This is engaging in formulating the education, research, innovation, ICT, we all know that. So why does Asia knowledge-based economy, some relationship we've been able to show it to you. It looks very interesting, just to makes a convincing case when I go to the decision makers. If you take the knowledge economy index and plot with the GDP, look at where the United States is. If you are in the knowledge economy, you're already rich. I find the countries which have been in knowledge-based economy or knowledge economy are also doing extremely well. Look at the United States, Finland, Japan, Singapore, and we are all here, very low. A strong correlation, which is a common sense correlation. But secondly, we are a poverty bank, so we have to look at what does this mean. If I'm on the knowledge economy, again, the countries which have very good knowledge index, they are not poor, and that's very clear. Look, I'm from Nepal, so look at it. They have 0 in terms of the knowledge-based index. I think knowledge-based economy, they're very poor. Cambodia, Nepal, Laos, etc. Look at Malaysia, Thailand, they're getting better. Just to prove the point that it does help poor people to move up to. So how far Asian countries, how has Asian countries performed? Now I'm going to have to be very quick here since it's all in the report, and Shanti will do it later. I want to show you this chart just to show you, if you take a total knowledge base index and rank the countries, this is how it looks like. This is the OECD average, 8.25 in a scale of 10. This is the Asian average, 4.39. Look at the only countries in Asia which are at the OECD level or above are Taipei, China, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, Korea, I would say. I would not be worried that I'm 16th and I'm 17th. I really go by block. What he said, if you take Philippines, I would say Philippines is not yet there, like Singapore, Japan, Hong Kong, Korea. This is how I would interfere. But then I would say, if I'm sitting in the government, I want to be there. Right? And you can see the other countries accordingly. This is too much of a chart, but it shows you there are the parameters that like higher education, ICT. I compare them. This is not in the book, I think, but I just for my curiosity, I said, how does Philippines look like with China, with Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam? And put another chart on Singapore, Korea. So this is for someone to take a look when you go home. It's a comparison, but there's a lot of data. Just for my own curiosity, I put this chart. Now, second pillar is the education system. Where do we stand? Here again, the ones which are really doing well are Korea at the top, Taipei, China, in Japan. In fact, when I was looking at the Korea data and talking to some of the people, I found there are far too many people in the school than there should be in Korea. And somehow, there are indicators, there are more people than what there should be in a normal situation. So I don't know if that's good or not. So this may have an impact in the future on the employment of these people. So I told the government colleagues that they better start thinking Korean people to find job not only in Korea but globally. Right? I mean, these are kind of inference you can make. Secondly, your tertiary education enrollment is very important. There's been a lot of focus in Asia, primary, secondary. And when I just came back from Gujarat, so that Gujarat summit, people talk about we have a dynamic young population, we have a demographic dividend. Frankly, I also worry the demographic dividend could be a demographic burden if these people are not educated. And there's a huge percentage of people who are below high school. And if majority of your people are going to be below high school or primary school, I don't think you're going to be in the knowledge economy to be able to compete with the world. So this is my own inference, not exactly written like that in the report, but I strongly believe the tertiary education is pretty essential to be in that kind of space. The second part of that education which we found is the quality side. There's a lot. This is partly done by McKinsey, partly done by us. I purposely chose a couple of slides, Suraj, to show how important McKinsey is providing this information. This is one of the slides, and we have our slide also later. It did a study to say, they asked their clients, here are students who are prepared in the university, they come with degrees, and they asked the employer, what do you think? You think these people were suitable to your needs? And here is what they had to say. In China, engineers produce, and India and China produce a lot of engineers. And they say, well, in India we could use only 20% of the people you produced from the school ready to work for us. That's scary. That means 75% of the people have degrees but no skills required for the employer. In the old days it was okay. In Japan, Korea, they used to just recruit people from the university and spend a lot of time in training. Now the private sector is not willing to do that. They have choices. They'll go to another country, find globally competitive. This is to me a very scary scenario. A student might someday start telling the professor, you didn't teach me well, or you didn't train me well, why did I pay the fees for you? I mean, this is happening, these kind of discussions are happening nowadays. And same look at the accounting, 30%, social science even less. Philippines is doing quite well on the financial accounting. I think that proves my intuitive feeling that Philippines is pretty good in this area, including this area. So what we're saying here is it is not enough to have the tertiary education and the degrees, but the skill. Maybe I'm taking too much time, but I do remember recently interviewing a person in ADB, very senior, at about 39 years old, which means 15 years already, 15, 16 years of experience already. And one question I asked is, by the way, what can you do? And the person's reply was, I got a master's from Kennedy School, I got a PhD from Stanford. I said, wait a minute, I'm not asking that. I said, what can you do? You've been already 15 years out of the school, and it took 5 years to keep on thinking, 5 minutes. And I felt if someone cannot say after 16 years of experience, or 15, 16 years, what can he or she do? I said, I'm not going to hire it. But that's my indicator, but that doesn't mean apply to anybody. So I think I'm a strong believer that if you come out of the school, you may not have all the skill, but you've got to build a skill at some point, whatever that skill. Communicator, media, fashion, design, you name it, but you must have it. But that's my theory. On the innovation side, this is very interesting and important, and this is where Asia is far, far behind. This was really not very much in the culture of the Asia, innovation culture. We are very afraid to fail. Losing face is a very important cultural factor. I cannot do something and fail. I can't go to school and fail. Although you may be able to become a very great guy in future. So because innovation culture has to be done. This is also true, by the way, in ADB. We can never fail. We can never do anything less than a AAA. But this doesn't happen all the time. So Asia is very, very far behind. But I must say Singapore, again, Taipei, Hong Kong, the same countries come back. I simply want to say that there's a lot of room for these countries aspiring to be first middle income and from middle income to the higher income to do that. Now let me skip ICT. I must say something about ICT. We have an ICT expert, Mr. Ibrahim here. Again, here he, I'm sure, would say more than me, but our analysis here shows there's a lot of room to do. A lot of room for countries to beef up that area. Again, it's the same countries who do well in other areas do in the ICT. There's a tremendous need to build a skill capacity and move up the ladder in this area, including I put here in Philippines. I could be corrected, Mr. Ibrahim, on this, but we find it somewhere here, not here. Economic incentive, the role of the government is very, very critical. I think the Philippines comes out very well here. The Philippine government, as Mr. Ibrahim was telling me, be open-minded to the private sector, because IT sector is pretty much led, as an example, by the private sector. And I remember talking to very senior government people and the senior government private sector in India. He said, one of the reasons it has done very well is the government did not understand what we were doing. So they would never regulate us, they would never catch us. And secondly, the government, we are moving so many times faster than the government guys could think. We do policy to you, you can think faster, but that was the reason, and that was the success. Otherwise, if we were regulated, you can imagine what would happen to this one. I do still remember the question I asked to a senior government official in India many, many years ago. You have Infosys, which is a great icon. I told the IAS gentleman, why don't you globalize this icon? He said, Bendo, you're terribly wrong. It's a private sector. Why would I globalize? Why would I help them? They need to help themselves. And then I talked to the same person, and the Finland guy, he said, yeah, we have Nokia, we will make it globalized. Government will do anything it can to make it a global brand. 100% opposite thinking. I don't know which one is right, but I know what I feel is right. And in the summary, again, I put the summary just in the Philippine context. Look at the Asia average. This is the Asia average. And we are all, compared to the OECD countries, in all of these 4 areas, we have a lot of momentum to the whole of Asia. And good news or not so bad news is Philippines is the average also. In most of the cases, there are ups and downs. But I would say all Asian countries who have not made it, except the ones that I showed you, Singapore, Hong Kong, etc., we have at least another half to catch up in the future. And the last slide is, we have our job to do in ADB also, so they've created a guy like me called the Vice President of Knowledge Management. I got doing the ICT, plus sustainable development. I have got a bunch of economists, MBAs like you. We're trying to see what that means. Is investment money, we are a bank, development bank, we're supposed to put money in the countries for development, but countries are not only interested anymore in the money, the cheap money that we provide. They see what value you can bring into us. So we've been increasingly challenged on the knowledge front ourselves. And it is with that in mind that to help be able to be relevant to the countries, to be able to continue to do business, we ourselves has taken this knowledge agenda very, very seriously. And it's really nice to come here and talk to you, and we will interact more later after. If there are smart speakers here, I'd like to hear them. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Bindu. To present the findings of the studies, may I call on Ms. Shanti Jagannathan, who is a Senior Education Specialist under the RSDD Department in ADB.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dean Luz. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to this audience about the study that the Asian Development Bank undertook on knowledge-based economies in Asia. You've already got a flavor of what this is all about from the VP's presentation. So I'll try to give a sort of a teaser, if you like, of some aspects, some key messages from these reports, which will sort of trigger greater interest from you to go ahead and read the reports, which are also available online. For this presentation, let me really start with a small story. You know, we hear about knowledge-based economic development being important for middle-income countries, for moving up the value chain, for breaking out of the middle-income trap to become high-income countries. But the most inspiring message that we found from this study was really that it can help to serve the lot of the poor. It doesn't necessarily have to be high-tech, but it also helps to serve a number of constituencies in poor economies. So let us take one big development challenge, which is access to electricity. I come from India. There are about an estimated 400 million households, people who do not have access to reliable electricity. Worldwide, over 1 billion people. They're not connected to the grid. They're not going to get grid-connected electricity anytime in the near future. This is a story of a business innovation, business and technology innovation, which brings clean energy, solar power energy to poor households. The sort of hope that you see over there, which is not connected. This is a company called Simpa. They innovated to develop a solution by which they provide a service based on solar energy, for which a poor household does not even have enough resources to invest in an upfront solar energy system. So they provide it as a service. So it is a combination of microelectronic technology, which is an instrument which unlocks the flow of energy through a system of SMS gateways. A rural consumer goes to a vendor, a local vendor, much like a mobile charge vendor, to pay for a service, and that gets unlocked through much like the lady is doing in the picture, by inputting an SMS code. And that unlocks energy for a month in that house, in that home there, for 2 lights and a fan and a mobile charging point. So this is an affordable technology which combines microelectronics, cloud computing, mobile technologies. This is an affordable solution, and this is the power of, if you like, what knowledge-based economic development can really bring to developing Asia, and really find solutions to problems which are still quite intractable. So where does Asia stand in terms of knowledge-based economic development? As Vice President Lohani's presentation pointed out, there's a long way to go. There's no doubt a lot to catch up on with regard to the 4 pillars of the knowledge economy, which is having an adequate economic incentive regime, to have an innovative capacity that's adequate to help the economy to grow. An ICT system which provides the information infrastructure required to advance as a knowledge-based economy, and an education system which provides the human talent required to advance on this frontier. But the clear message in this study is that for developing Asia, there's a more unique model that we can consider in the current times. It's not that we just need to embrace the conventional wisdom. There is need to look at conventional wisdom. There's a lot to be gained by learning lessons from advanced economies, but there is a very clear idea that developing economies can generate by looking at the current trends and their own unique strengths. And which really arise from the kind of opportunities of the current times. This is a slide that you saw, which shows that there's a lot to catch up on, but the interesting points about this study is that Asia can benefit and move along the frontier of a knowledge economy by drawing on its own strengths. While indeed they have to invest in education and training, which is of a higher order, strengthen their skills development systems, invest in R&D, strengthen their innovative capacities. All of these initiatives they have to do, but they have a unique roadmap that can help them to accelerate that progress, which is about frugal innovation, which is about not necessarily always high technology. The first example that I gave, the story, is about frugal innovation. India and China have already distinguished themselves very strongly with their track record in commercializing frugal innovation, in making innovation work for the masses. They're already making they're making products which are then innovated for their countries and then exported out. So the so-called reverse engineering. A country like China has become a e-commerce behemoth. These are all native strengths that are available to these economies to leverage and to chalk out their own unique roadmap, which is not necessarily conventional wisdom, which is not necessarily a linear pathway, which is more like leapfrogging, or if you like, more non-linear pathways, which is also about amplifying the strengths that already exist. Things like, can we look at more innovative approaches to education by teaming up with corporates, more tailor-made education, more investing in skills and training, rather than, all over Asia there is a strong degree bias, bias towards certification and degrees, which are not necessary. There's a rising problem of graduate unemployment. A number of countries are looking at this problem strongly and innovating in creating credentials which are mezzanine credentials, which are more focused on skills and which are more focused on market-driven qualifications and endowments, which are not necessarily degree-oriented. So our central message that we wanted to convey through these reports is that knowledge-based economic development can be really a powerful tool for inclusive growth. It does not just help to lift economies out of the middle income trap and move to high income trap. There's a very abiding problem of inequalities. In some of the fastest growing countries, whether it's India, Indonesia, China, the level of inequalities have grown tremendously, as measured by Gini coefficient, by any other measure as well. So the inequalities have grown tremendously. So we need solutions for knowledge development, which is more like an embracing solution, which also looks at the masses, which looks at finding solutions which will serve a majority of the population. Otherwise, you could have, for instance, higher order talent in a few people can actually even exacerbate the inequalities. So the sort of strategies that are employed for knowledge-based economic development need to consider this dimension. How can that be done? An example could be more support to like developing intellectual property right protection for technologies that serve the masses, more help to innovators on the ground, more barefoot innovators, if you like. How can government support barefoot innovators? How can marketing support be given? How can the linkage to the market be provided for products that have sort of a bottom of the pyramid kind of application? So those are the kind of, they are for knowledge-based industries, but they are very clearly targeting consumers which have a mass base. And here again, I want to take you through a couple of stories. Text to teach in the Philippines. We all know that a major problem in the education system is the lack of availability of trained teacher and high quality educational resources in remote areas. And this project, which is already a decade old, has tried to address it through a partnership between a telecom company, Ministry of Education, sort of a mobile phone operator, and it really helped to beam high quality audio and video resources through mobile into the classroom. As you can see, the teacher being able to download educational videos. And over time, this really had a huge impact in the classroom. It helped reduce dropouts, increase student engagement, increase learning outcomes. It just improved the sort of interaction of the classroom. So this is again a sort of a partnership model which looks at pulling down technology to issues that matter for development. And the other picture that you see on the screen is in Bhutan, is another ADB project. The SIMPA project that I began with is also invested by the ADB. You can see the hilly terrain. The country is very mountainous, and this is about health project. The district health center has the doctors, has the medical facilities. The sub-center in the village, in the mountains, on the hills, has practically no support system. Sometimes patients have to travel 25 kilometers to go to a district center, even if it's a minor ailment. So through this project, using television white spaces, the attempt has been to link a district health center doctor to provide telemedicine to the rural center through Skype and through cloud-based technologies. So the smaller ailments can be treated in this way, and there is a sort of a diagnostic toolkit at the sub-center, which the district health center doctor is able to navigate with an attendant. So again, technology being pulled down to the local level to help address a very critical issue. Or if they have to travel 25 kilometers, then how are they going to go on with their productive lives? So now I come to this, the third point is about, there are these opportunities. So if appropriate action is not taken at the right time, then really the high cost of inaction is from missed opportunities. And there are all these technologies that are currently sweeping the Asian region, if you like, and more specifically the mobile technologies. And the figures are out there for you to see. they may be off-grid in terms of electricity, they're all on net through their mobiles. The fixed broadband may not have penetrated as much in Asia, but mobile broadband has. And even the poorest of the poor have now access to mobile. I remember traveling in India to the 11 most backward districts in the country. There was no health center, there was no electricity, there was no doctor, but there was a mobile phone available in the village. So these are all technologies that can be tapped and brought to bear for the welfare and for the advancement of the economy as a greater number of people become more productive and more active in their lives. So need to really invest in technologies that make sense for the masses. While there may be a few high-end technologies that economies do support, the exciting benefits, the more widespread benefits will be from technologies that serve the masses. And for that, more coordinated action is needed, more advanced thinking is needed, and partnerships. And for instance, in Korea, which is one of the most networked and society in the world, the government spent many years investing ahead of the market demand in building an ICT infrastructure, the benefits of which they are reaping now. In 2015, they aim to put all their school textbooks, make them digital in the entire country, well ahead of the United States. So, and then for education, I feel that the onset of the massive open online courses for ICT is the most. How many of you have heard about MOOCs? Well, if you haven't heard, I think you should Google it immediately. This is completely revolutionized, or if you like, just completely revolutionized the concept of education. The availability of the most advanced courses in an open online format. And I just want to show you a 2-minute video clip. Okay, if it's not working, we'll move on. It's basically a story of a 12-year-old girl in...
Would you share with everybody how you first discovered online learning? And what was it about it that excited you?
First of all, I would like to start with a quote my parents always told me. What one man can do, another can also. So my story started about 2 years back when I found an article about artificial intelligence. My first...
Where were you living at the time? Were you exactly?
Lahore.
Lahore, okay.
So first I started artificial intelligence taught by Stanford University's professors. It was hard and it had lots of tight deadlines. But I eventually completed it. After I had completed it, I got an email from them saying that they're opening a new site called Udacity. And I said, oh wow, that means multiple subjects and multiple courses. So I quickly registered for it and started doing the first courses I ever saw. And I think that MOOCs may allow peace in the world because over there everyone is living in peace and harmony. They're talking.
Yeah. So I'll stop there this is the Davos 2015 is going on now. This is in Davos 2013, and that's Friedman interviewing her. There's a 12-year-old from Pakistan who finished an artificial intelligence course and an advanced physics course with the highest distinction. So that's what the power of MOOCs is about. And now it's completely revolutionizing our thinking about brick and mortar higher education. And while the business model and the education model is yet to be proven, the fact that it has completely, it's a sort of a disruptive technology that has completely changed our understanding of how education can be provided. So I will just come to the last two slides. So basically, if all these things have to be taken forward, there's a lot more focus needed on partnerships and collaborations. Singapore became one of the world-leading countries in excellence in education through systematic partnerships with world-leading educational organizations, and now they have created their own hub. And that's another thing that's developing in Asia, that there are these regional hubs of excellence that the group of countries can benefit from. That their Home for Talent initiative is an example of that. We have the advanced economies in the region who can help to strengthen the partnerships that we need. The ASEAN Science and Technology Partnership is another example where these can be taken forward. Now, just want to have a slide on, you're all students of management education. What does it really mean? When you talk about this sort of new developments and new approaches to knowledge-based economic development, I feel one of the things is that you need to look at more case studies, not just of MNCs, but more also about the small and medium enterprises, the enterprises who are now serving business models at the bottom of the pyramid, social enterprises. We need to look at technologies which are frugal, which are middle tech. Projections are showing that they will grow much faster than high-tech products in the coming years. And also, how can we leverage knowledge-based assets more effectively to bring greater returns to developing economies? And that now learning and education is now very clearly beyond borders and beyond physical boundaries of buildings, of classrooms. It is definitely now far beyond these constraints. So I'd just like to end with the slide that there is a huge potential that developing economies can reap. That's what we try to show in these reports. Far more detail and data is available in these reports, but timely action is critical, and that can be game-changing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shanti. We have a number of discussants, two in particular that we give the floor to. The first is Suraj from the McKinsey & Company in the Philippines. He's the managing partner.
Can you guys hear me okay if I just raise my voice? Thank you, Dean Luz, Bindu, Shanti, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today. I went to a business school called the IIM, which was set up in India around the same time the AIM was set up here. And what is spooky for me whenever I come to the AIM is our classroom there was exactly like this classroom here. And I've always sat in that chair. That was my place in my first year. Now, when I was in the IIM, we had points for class participation. We called it CP. We got points for speaking up, and we just spoke up because we believed that got us more points. I'm going to try to not do that today. I thought that the report, and I was up at 5 o'clock this morning reading it again, because I read it last night. I thought it was very, very interesting. Thank you for producing it. I think it really takes the discussion on knowledge economies forward quite a lot. And what I thought I would do is, just FYI, I spent 15 years at McKinsey. I spent 14 years of those in technology and telecoms type industries. And so that's kind of what appeals to me. I thought I'd just raise two thoughts that came to mind as I read the report and try to tie that back into what I've been seeing in the Philippines since I moved here 9 months ago. A few months ago, we released this perspective on ASEAN around ASEAN growth. I think one of the things, Bindu, that you spoke about is productivity in the report quite a lot. And the Philippines has grown at about 5% GDP at about 5% consistently since 2000. There's two things that drive GDP. One is more people in the economy, and the second is each person in the economy producing more per person. Now, approximately half of the Philippines' growth over the last 15 years has just come from having more people producing stuff in the economy. Right? Now, it's actually quite straightforward. You can do the maths. That number is going to drop dramatically in the next 15 years, which means for the Philippines to keep growing at 5% over the next 15 years, the rate at which people produce more has to go up by 60%. It's a second level differential. 60% growth in productivity required year on year for the next 15 years. That has been achieved historically, but maybe like, for example, in South Korea, at the peak of its growth was kind of adding that kind of productivity. It's a huge challenge, and what excites me about this whole knowledge-based economy topic is, I used to be in Africa before this, and we believe that in markets like Africa, like developing Asia, innovation, technology can add a full percentage point onto GDP growth every year. A full percentage point. You can make 5% into 6%. And it does that through 4 factors. One is, of course, just the telecom operators investing in network and people paying too much, frankly, sometimes for those services. That's one. The second is private sector investments in technology. One of the things that shocked us when we did a survey with SMEs in Africa was that the awareness of stuff like cloud technology was not surprisingly lower than in Europe, but the willingness to adopt amongst people who are aware was just much, much higher. And the readiness of people who adopted once to adopt twice, third time, fourth time, fifth time was just out of the ballpark. And the reason is that these are companies which historically have not invested in buying small servers and PCs. They're happy to go straight onto the cloud. And you look at the kinds of investments that can drive, it's actually huge amounts of GDP productivity growth. The third is, of course, public sector moving its investments online, and I'll come back to that a bit later, but just public sector, government as a driver of expenditure and a driver of investment. And then finally, the indirect benefits are actually huge, much bigger in our type of countries than they are in developed markets. And that's because there are people in cities like Bangladesh and so on and so forth who today probably can't get the kinds of merchandise that we get sitting here in Makati. And the internet enables all of that. Technology allows people, you gave several examples of power and health. It allows people to access produce that they could not previously do, and does away with some of the inefficiencies that poor roads and limited access give us in developing markets. And so we just believe that this is a huge, huge unlock for economies. Now, I would like to leave you all developmental economists. I'm not a developmental economist. There's 2 questions that I've often grappled with, and we grappled with some of our clients in the public sector and the developmental sector. The first is how do we actually create the infrastructure to support some of this stuff, and how do we finance that? We often speak about broadband, and the report spoke, I think, very well about how mobile enables people to get online. And mobile is great if you want to go to Facebook or buy something online, but the reality is, if as an SME you want to move to cloud, you can't do that on your mobile phone. You need some kind of fixed line access, high speed fixed line access. So all broadband is not broadband. There's broadband and there's broadband. Right? Many of us who've tried to stream video in this country have probably at times felt like this is not broadband. And so you need to have good quality broadband to do some of the things that truly provide those productivity benefits beyond entertainment. And the difficulty, of course, is that the people who invest in broadband get only a small part of the benefit from the broadband, because the telcos actually don't really make a lot of money out of the broadband in reality. The business case doesn't make sense for them. In fact, I could be confident enough to say that there is no country in the world which has good broadband infrastructure where somehow somebody has not subsidized it in some way. The Korea example, the government got very, very involved. And we'll talk about other countries later on where the government just needs to get involved to understand how much broadband do we actually need, what do we actually want to enable. And the question of then how to finance that becomes quite a challenge in many countries. We take Singapore, where in their typical Singaporean methodical way, the government has kind of put in place 2 or 3 operators that they've well structured, a wholesale player, a retail player, and so on and so forth. And that's an example of a developed country which is doing it and catching up. But if you look at the developing areas, Malaysia has done some very interesting experiments where the government and Telkom Malaysia have come together in a PPP and built out fiber to 20% of the population, which is now enabling them to drive some SME type benefits and so on and so forth. And I think that is one puzzle that I think we still as a community haven't cracked. And I do believe if we don't crack it, we do condemn our people to perpetual backwardness. I think the 50% window that you spoke about depends so much on us being able to unlock that. So So that's one question that comes to mind. The other question that comes to mind is how do we as countries think about what we each want to focus on? Right? I mean, clearly, when we think about the benefits from this stuff, you can try and build businesses around ICT. And all technology, knowledge businesses are not the same. It's very different building a hardware business and building a software business. In software, building a services business versus a products business. We see Korea, China have gone the hardware way. We've seen that Malaysia is going the SME way. They want to build lots of cloud-enabled SMEs, Martrade and so on and so forth. For each country, given what we have, what is the right answer in terms of the knowledge economy we can build and how we can leverage technology to grow in business. On the social side, e-health, e-education, I mean, I'm so happy to see the Bhutan experiment. Because we have seen that can unlock huge amounts of value. There was an experiment in India which showed that M-Health, just be the ability to call a doctor in a rural area rather than have to go to a doctor, can cut government's primary healthcare spending by 90%. And in 90% of the cases, the doctor says take an aspirin, go to sleep, it's solved. So you actually don't have to go to the hospital. The question is how do we scale those models, and for which countries does that become the focus? So is it business, is it social, or finally is it really about government services? India is going that route, or at least professing to go that route. With the UID and government driving the networks, the villages and so on and so forth. But how do we think about, how does each country come up with the answer on what its niche is in the world in the context of, the Philippines context of ASEAN, AEC, what is our place? And what's the place of a country like Laos or a country like Myanmar? And then what does that mean in terms of all the questions the report asks, skills, funding, the cluster development, training and so on and so forth. Those are just the two thoughts I'd like to leave you with, which is I'd love for us to debate is A, how do we create the infrastructure, how do we fund it and how much, and B, how do we think about what each country should focus on. But again, thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed reading that report.
Thank you, Suraj. The next discussant is Mon Ibrahim. Mon is Deputy Executive Director for Information Communication Technology Office of the Department of Science and Technology.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I made a mistake of actually accepting the invitation to be the government panelist before reading the reports, okay? And after I've actually scanned through the case studies, I got so scared. What am I gonna say about the Philippines? Anyway, what I did, but before that, whatever I'm going to say here does not necessarily represent the position of the government, okay? I'm here, I'm from the government, but I'm here on a personal basis. So what I did is actually, I just listed down all the things that we're currently doing that I believe would actually lead towards developing a knowledge-based success economy, at least the ecosystem being there. So, education, a lot of things, very, very significant things happening in the education sector. The K-12 basic education transition. We're actually transitioning right now. The good thing about this is we're finally going to have a special track for science and math in the last 2 years of our basic education. For tertiary education, we're finally moving, transitioning as well to an outcomes-based education. And this would actually now involve industry working very, very closely with academia in actually trying to define the competencies that they actually really need out there. Third would actually be accreditation system. one of the basic problems we have in the Philippines is quality of emphasis of tertiary education. So for undergraduate engineering programs, the Philippines has actually been recently accepted as a probationary member of the Washington Accord. Okay, and this is actually an agreement of 32 accrediting bodies worldwide, where everyone is saying that the program that you have in the Philippines is equivalent to the same program that we have here in our own country. Okay, and that's for undergraduate engineering programs. For computing and IT, we're actually in the process of finalizing our membership with the Seoul Accord. There are currently 8 countries who are actually whose accrediting bodies have formed the Seoul Accord. We hope to be the 9th country, and we hope to actually be accepted as a probationary member by the middle of 2015. Now, for Washington Accord, the very first university that has been accredited by the local accrediting body is actually the Mapua Institute of Technology. Okay. And Seoul Accord and the Washington Accord, the accrediting body is actually established by the Philippine Technology Council, which is actually composed of all the engineering associations in the Philippines. For Seoul Accord, it's being led by the Philippine Computer Society, the organization of which is Philippine-based IT professionals. Okay. For business and computing undergraduate degrees, the Commission on Higher Education recently approved 2 new areas of specialization. This is 21 units of service management. This was actually the driving force here was actually the IT-BPM or IT-BPO industry represented by IBPAP. They're currently rolling this out. We have about the first batch of universities that have actually started to offer this are the 32 state universities all over the country. And then the third one, middle of last year, the Commission actually approved a new specialization track on analytics. This is for both computing and business-related university programs. And the driving force here is actually IBM, who just recently moved some of their analytics practice from India to the Philippines. And then the Commission on Higher Education has finally opened up to getting bigger or a higher degree of collaboration from the industry. So all new all changes right now in the curricula will actually be driven by technical panels composed of people from the industry. I myself actually is a member of the technical panel for IT education for the last 6 years, and the 2 new areas of specialization were actually a product of the technical panel work, which is approved by the Commission. And finally, with the help of ADB and of course the Asian Institute of Management and the University of the Philippines, Open University, the industry is going to actually be opening up knowledge hubs. These are virtual knowledge hubs, okay, to allow people in the regions, in the provinces, to actually take up online courses. This will actually be a course through the platform of the University of the Philippines, Open University. Okay, but mainly for competencies related to the IT BPM sector initially. Next slide, please. Okay, for Infocom Technologies, the free Wi-Fi internet access in public places is actually going to be the flagship program beginning this year of our agency. This came about, it has been in the drawing board for the last 7 years, but the biggest challenge we were actually anticipating was that we're not going to get the budget for this. Okay? And surprisingly, in the last budget hearing over at the Senate, okay, where we actually allocated just a little over 350 million pesos for setting this up, okay, and over 1.5 billion, we were looking at allocating for the purchase of laptops for at least 100,000 of these public sector workers. Okay, suddenly the senator said, "Are you crazy? Okay, move this budget to here, okay, and start rolling out the free public Wi-Fi access program." Of course, the chair of the committee is actually the Senator Rector, who hails from Batangas, and his first request is do it first in Batangas. Okay. So the free Wi-Fi internet public access is actually going to be rolled out in all the class 4, 5, 6 municipalities, about 750 of them. All public schools there, all municipal halls, all public places, including bus stations. We will actually roll it out there. Okay. The telco industry in the Philippines is the regulated industry. Okay, does that mean that we're actually going to be competing with the telco sector? No, will actually be the government will be buying bulk from the telcos. Okay, so in a way, it's actually also subsidizing, okay, the whole thing. And this is just going to be the first year of rollout. So for this year, we're actually intending to roll this out in at least 1,200 municipalities all over the country. Okay. So we've actually reorganized the office just to actually really focus on this one. iGov Philippines is all about enabling access of government services by citizens online. Okay. And one of the biggest surprises we have when we actually started this project 3 years ago was the fact that we didn't realize that the government actually has several thousands of kilometers of unutilized fiber assets. Why is this so? The power grid, it has fiber, okay, and we're actually not using it. The LRT, the MRT, they all have fibers, and we're actually not using this. So, a major part of this initiative is to actually make use of this now, to at least connect all the government agencies within the National Capital Region and other regional government centers. Okay. The TV White Space Initiative, I'm very, very glad that Shanti actually highlighted the experiment in Bhutan. We're actually the one helping them with that experiment because we started this one in Bohol. Okay, TV White Space is all about making use now of that space between Channel 2 and Channel 4, Channel 3. Okay, because in the olden days, okay, we were not allowed to actually assign that to anybody because there's going to be interference. Today, we have new technologies that would actually dynamically prevent interference between Channel 2 and Channel 4. So, and that is a very powerful asset that we have, okay? And that is actually what we're going to be using. After Bohol, the next pilot province is going to be Cavite. And we plan to actually roll this out as well all over the country as our last mile wireless connection to the public places, okay? And then finally, the Tech for Ed centers. You've heard, some of you may have heard of our community centers. We're actually converting some of these to become educational centers, okay? Even for places that right now don't have Wi-Fi access, okay? We'd like them to actually make use of these community centers for to have internet access. Next slide. Okay. Economic incentives, institutional regime. The government intends to continue with the investment of the IPP incentives. Okay. And what is also, we found out that a major factor in the success of our IT BPM industry in the Philippines, specifically in the next wave cities, actually are the 44 plus or 40 plus ICT councils that we've helped organize all over the country. Okay, so we're trying to institutionalize this partnership. Okay, we're not actually giving them money, but we're basically just telling them if you want to be like, like Manila, okay, you have to do it yourself. Okay, next slide, please. And finally, for innovation, this is actually my baby, Digital PH. And we have 4 major programs under the Digital PH initiative. The Next Wave series is actually building the right ecosystem for IT and BPM, which is for the IT BPM players to actually move to the provinces. Personally, when I joined government 9 years ago, I said, I want to focus on making things happen in the provinces because the future of this country is going to be in the countryside. Okay? So the next wave cities, and we've seen the economic impact of this in Bacolod alone. They now employ direct employment of 20,000 plus people working for the IT BPM sector or the BPO sector there. And that actually is resulting to at least 300 million pesos fresh money getting into the economy of Bacolod City every month. It has actually enabled the increase in the enrollment in the universities more than 100% the last 3 years. Okay? Stepping up the value chain is actually moving the Philippines to, helping the players in the Philippines to move up from just being able to do call center up the value chain. Okay? And most of the things that we're actually doing here is actually providing scholarship for more people to actually be able to to go through Lean Six Sigma, and other quality management workshops. Okay, as well as producing more certified project managers in the industry. CPH is our startup ecosystem initiative. And a lot of this actually, we're working with the players, specifically the Philippine Software Industry Association. I think I see over there, we have a couple of guys there from PSIA. Okay. And rural impact sourcing is all about enabling skilled talent in those places where in the next 10 years will not actually qualify or will that still not become attractive to BPO companies. Okay. So we're talking here of places like my own province, Lano del Sur, okay, enabling them, be able to work from home and do BPO jobs. So that's actually my long list. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mon. I'm on the program also as a discussant, but I really want to leave enough time for the open forum. I do have one question that I do want to pose with reference to the report. The cases that were mentioned, Finland, Singapore, Korea, and so on, tend to be country cases where you have strong governments. And you have governments, when I say strong governments, it's not only do you have the institutions, but you have the continuity that allows for the kind of investment that you can carry out over time. I'll use the Philippines as a case country where we don't particularly have a strong government, or if we do have a strong government, it may be strong for a limited period of time, such as this administration, which will come to an end middle of 2016, and then who knows what happens after 2016, who comes to. So I guess the question is, where you need to have the kind of continuity to make this kind of investment happen and then carry it through. Are there cases, country cases, where you have a private sector driven initiative, and that's the case in the Philippines, where actually the long-term innovations in this country are really driven by a private sector. It's driven by, an Ayala group, a Lopez group, and so on and so forth. And they really take the lead. So, are there cases of countries where the private sector has really taken the lead and made it happen, despite or in spite of a weak government or a government that has no continuity or little continuity? On the other hand, there are some real risks to this, and I take the case of our telcos here. You've got, the Globe and the Smart have really driven. They've been responsible after the liberalization of the telecommunication sector during the Ramos administration. They really took the lead and expanded all over the country, such that we're pretty much we're tremendously connected. The only problem is that because government is a weak regulator in that sense, the telcos are not interconnected as well as they could be, and maybe that's part of the problem why we have slow connectivity, poor broadband, and so on and so forth. So my question is, in any of these studies, have you found or have you identified a country where the private sector has really driven this kind of innovation in an institutional way, despite having poor government or no government continuity? So that's my question. And now, perhaps we should open it up to the floor for other questions to our speakers, discussants, and resource persons. And if you do ask a question, introduce yourself, where you come from, so that they have a sense, context in which you're asking a question. Takers? Yes, please.
I need a microphone.
Yeah, there are microphones here on the sides.
Good evening. I'm Mustafiz from Bangladesh. First of all, I'm so blessed that I got an AIM scholarship and I'm doing my MDM course here. Thank you so much for this. Well, my question is, in order to take the shift knowledge-based economy, what should be the role of government, ADB team, from our respective countries' point of view? And what ADB can do to make it happen? And at the same time, in order to involve the bottom of the pyramid in this shifting, what kind of role our government can play and what kind of support ADB will be providing? Thank you.
Maybe we take a couple of questions before we. Yes, we? Yes.
Hello everybody, good evening. My name is Muhibullah, I come from Pakistan, and I have this one question which actually I faced. I had been working in the rural community of Pakistan for like 9 years. So we had a high challenge to really get the authentic data from the communities, and the data which we received, like the number of beneficiaries and likewise, and it used to be well reflected as the donors used to be pleased with. So based on that understanding which I received, so we saw a couple of examples in India, like there's a kind of solar system established, and then we talked about text to teaching project in Philippines. So what's the follow-up mechanism or the mechanism within ADB to establish that the data received is accurate and to really make sure that it can really contribute to the knowledge base created or to be created by ADB? So this question I have. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to pick that up? Vidhu or Shanti, please?
Let me begin, and Shanti can always fill up the gaps. First of all, thank you very much. We didn't want this to be ADB-centric discussions, but it was really on the report. That's fine. When you see ADB people, ADB questions coming. First, the question that you asked, strong government, therefore, some of these countries like Finland, Singapore, Korea were able to do that. It's correct. But what is even more important is strong governance rather than a strong government. And I think this proves the point in India that in spite of the IT development in India is not so much by the government, I think. Yes, it was in Korea, strongly led. I would say public-private partnership. The government pushed it, helped it, but totally in consultation with the private sector. In a country like that, you become one team to get to the objective. So one country, when you said which did it in spite of the governance or the government, if you agree, Shanti, is India. Is a good example. The US is another example, Silicon Valley, etc. I think the way I'm observing now, the startup in the tech particularly, Suraj, you know more than me on this, it's all led by the young people. I don't think they've been asking who the government is, who the leader is. They're just starting up on their own. I only hope the government don't overregulate. As you were talking about, we need someone like him who believes I just need to be helpful to them rather than governing them. So the role of the government is important because they can be positive, they can be negative, but I think so far in the IT sector, the IT company, the private sector has been thinking so fast, as I said earlier, that the government couldn't catch up. That's a good thing. There are still one or two countries I know in the region, or maybe more than one or two, which are still trying to regulate this, and they haven't gone very far. But they also know that they need to move into the deregulate this in future. Again, talking about the role of government, I was last week in Gujarat Forum, and there was a session in which I attended, Make in India. And people who came in were most of the 90% of people who came in there were people who were not carrying Indian passport but Indian born. And one of the presentations was on the MOOCs. The MIT professor who is now leading the edX. He says, all I need is I can provide everything I have free. But I'm having a problem, and he was telling me, can you help me to tell the government to accept it free? And that was to me, I said, look, why is that? But he was so confused. Why is there something I want to provide with this platform free where people would be able to get these courses on their own? And the government said that is preventing it. So that kind of role, I hope they don't take it for whatever reason. There is a suspicion, because they don't understand, they become suspicious. Particularly in the education sector, I think I am a strong believer that someday we will be able to take a Harvard course out of here by paying maybe a small tuition. Today you can register Coursera. I go to Coursera myself and take a few courses. Sometimes I'm not able to fully complete, I must admit that, but I do register and finally say, look, you didn't attend 50% of the courses. But the materials are good and they are free. They will give you a certificate if you take the exams and do homework, etc. Short of getting the grades. In my class, if they were saying, okay, the Stanford course, I took it. If they say, I'm also going to give you a grade A or B plus, and I will recognize this grade, I think you don't have to travel to Stanford all the way to get that. So this is coming. And therefore, the education ministry, the IT ministry I think we should start thinking now. Some governments are behind, some are ahead, but to me it's coming. Okay. On the role of government, the Bangladesh question, what ADB can do. I was in Bangladesh sometime September, October last year. I met the finance minister. I made a similar presentation but with the Bangladesh focus. I had a comparison chart where Bangladesh stands, what it could do, and made a detailed focus in the country. And he said, okay, this is good, I want to move into this. But again, if he says, sorry, this is hopeless, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to let anybody do it, that's the end of the story. So we have, ADB can bring this dialogue to the countries, and it can become helpful. And I was in Sri Lanka doing something else at the time when the government made a budget, presented the budget to the parliament. The finance minister showed me the first page of the cover to impress me. It is knowledge-based budget. Right? The cover was good, but inside was not necessarily full, I must admit that. But still, the thinking was there to move into that direction. What can I say? That ADB does bring this kind of study, knowledge for dialogue. At the end of the day, the government says no, it's no. We do have, we can facilitate the discussion. The advantage is the ADB is won by the government. Bangladesh is a winner, Pakistan is a winner, India is a winner. And so they do have faith on the organization because they want it. I'm only employed, by the way. I don't know, the ADB is won by the countries. And the last question that was from Pakistan, if I don't know whether I understood it right, but what you mean is, how do you make sure the data is accurate?
Yeah.
And if the data is accurate, how do you turn them into? I'm really the mind-boggling in terms of the data field, the data analytics, the instant data people are able to provide today. I've been using once in a while this various applications for getting a taxi or how to come to Makati. You know, I live on the other side near ADB, and immediately say, don't take this route. Turn, go by C5 today, the traffic is here. And then somebody puts, what's the application? My son put it here. He says, wait. And he says, well, there's a small jam here, or there's a small accident here. Imagine the power of today. I think as you rightly said, the data collection, as we were doing in the past, that mindset has to disappear. The new ability to get instant data. I know people working in some startup companies, and these people have global data at any time, and they can produce it. And we see all the time in your Facebooks, etc. So many people have watched this program at this point in time. So there is somebody recording you and me at this point in time. Right? And I think the power of the data, but you bring a good point. We need to also scrutinize the data, the whole field of metadata and data analytics. Our first impression in the ADB, when somebody provides the data, we don't just take it. Even economic data, we just look at it whether it makes sense. So this is a good point you mentioned, and I think, but so essential in this knowledge-based economy, particularly with the power of the ID. I think I probably rambled all questions, but you can ask more, yeah.
Anil, please, and then Sita, and then Reza.
Hello, I'm Anil Garkali from Nepal. Namaste, sir. My specific question I'm quite curious about. Okay, we are talking about 2050, which is still long. And then what is the reasonable time frame for something that this Korea took for to go on the step 4, as we saw in the chart. And then which are the sectors Korea, maybe we know a bit of Singapore, but we like to be on Korea, so which of the sectors they really did it, and then they are excelling in those days. And in the Korea's case, is there any external supports or something like that, so in their success, or they did it themselves? So thank you.
Okay, Zita.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jinita from Nepal. I'm also one of the ADB scholar. I'm very much impressed with the presentation, and it seems very interesting. However, I have a question that what is the spatial mechanism or the strategy that ADB has made for a country who is way behind in economic development? Thank you.
Any special strategy for countries? I guess this has to do, if you read the report, there's a portion in there which talks about countries that are far behind who might be able to leapfrog. I guess that's part of that kind of a question, right?
Okay,
What special strategy would you have? Okay. Is Reza first? Yeah.
Good evening, I'm Reza from Indonesia. I get quite mind-boggling question for myself too. First is that, what are the challenges faced by the ASEAN economic community members that is coming this year in relation to knowledge-based economy? And then I had a look at the report book, and I was quite happy and surprised at the same time that Indonesia is in it. So, and based on McKinsey, that Indonesia will be the world's 7th largest economy in the world in 2030. So going from there, do you think later on Indonesia can take the lead in the Asian region? And also, do you think ASEAN single currency model can be applied in the region anytime soon? And is there any lessons that we can learn from the EU, the success and the failure? Thank you.
Okay, let me take the first crack at it. Let's start with the last one. Asian single currency. I think you answered yourself based on the experience of the European experience, the Greece crisis, Asian economic. One single currency is not on the table anymore. It was on the table back in 1997, 1998 when there was Asian crisis. Everybody was thinking we must have our own currency, and that's no longer the discussion today. And you've seen what happened to what's happening to many of the currencies. Second, Indonesia is only the third largest country in the world, $250 million, a huge country. And if you look at the Nation 2050 chart that I put in, it's one of the 7 countries which will drive that 52% growth. The answer, your question was, can Indonesia take the lead? The answer is definitely yes. Will it take the lead? Yes, it is trying to take it, but it's a question. We'll have to observe whether those mega challenges and many other internal challenges could be taken by the country. I mean, any country can take it. Most of the Philippines can become stronger and becoming like Singapore, Korea today, in my opinion. The Koreans used to come to learn banking here, I remember that. Back in the 60s, they came to. In fact, I was working at one time, there was a question on Korea too, right? Korea, what happened. I used to, when I was in the bank one time, one of my vice presidents who has my job, which I have the job now, he was my boss. He was from Korea. He was Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister of Japan, Korea. So I asked him, how did you manage to do this, your question here? He said, simple thing. We all sat together and said, what are the few things that we will be competitive in future? And that's we just decided we'll go into shipbuilding. At that time, Japan had about 88% or 80+% of the market share in shipbuilding. And they're going to try to build from scratch and get it here with the market share. At one point, Korea had about 44% of the market share. I don't know exactly at the moment. There are Bangladesh, Vietnam, all of them are doing it. So, in the end, you prepare for that, the role of the government, private sector, external support. Somebody used the word external support. All of those, you decide what it is. And I said, I don't have the people, I don't have technocrats. Go and find them. So you can't be too nationalistic to say that, okay, I don't have the people, so what do I do? If you want to create an expert like you, how many years of education do you need? 12 plus 4 plus 2, at least 16 to 18 years. So you want to wait 18 years before the guy has just a master's degree and maybe another 10 years. So you wait 30 years. So you have to have a policy, and they did it. They said, let's go around the world, find out anybody who is Korean. And they said, oh, yeah, I'm Korean, but I've got an American passport. You Korean, come. When do you UK? I've got a UK passport. No, you Korean, come. And I think they built it. Most of them. I think with this model, really, in my view, personal view, it's not any view, but you said not the government view. Philippines can do that. We got lots of Filipinos in great jobs in Singapore. They're running the place. They're running in the United States. You just have to go and say, oh, you're from Philippines, you burn Philippines, you've got an American passport, so what? You're a Filipino, come back, go and do the work. You need a drive at that time for the talents. Otherwise, if you think I would just develop in my own university, I take 20, 30 years behind. So this is a my policy. I never forget the discussion I had when Cambodia had just opened up. I was in the operations department. The finance minister in a discussion told, we're just starting operation in Cambodia. He said, I don't have any talented person in Cambodia to do the job. I know in Cambodia is starting with very knowledge deficient. So I said, what are you going to do? Please provide us money to do the education. I said, we can do that. But I said, hire 10,000 people globally. Politically, totally not acceptable. So how can I hire 10,000 people from outside? Singapore, what did you do? It's got 1 million people expect. So I think these are kind of choices we need to do. Where did Korea decide to do? I said shipbuilding, manufacturing, ICT, shipping, and they put a lot of emphasis on education and went out and brought very well educated, their own people, as I said, no matter what the passport was. So along the same line, the Indonesia, again coming back to this, it's a huge country, so much potential, so much resources. It's a matter, again, one thing I would never forget, which are being started is governance, strong government. Yes, there are a lot of strong leaders in many countries in Africa, other places, but not necessarily the best governance. So strong government is starting with strong governance like we have here now. Things are moving. Look at what happened in the last few years. This country has become investment grade. The growth rate is good. So private sector, foreign investments are coming in. So good government, good governance. Both. And there was a question from a lady. Special, what ADB is doing for relatively poor countries. So we do tell them, country like Nepal, you come from, I come from Nepal, we call the countries which gets our concessional fund. They even grant money, free money. They even get concessional fund, which is about 1% to 1.5% rate to be paid in 32 years. I wish I had that kind of money. That's almost like free money, to be paid in 32 years, 1.5%, 8 years, plus 8 years grace period. So here, we do tell them that, look, you don't have to keep on doing what you've been doing. The leapfrogging, somebody mentioned, you mentioned, I think, the leapfrogging, there is enough room for leapfrogging. Nepal doesn't have enough energy, as an example. There's a lot of brownout. I don't see a reason with so much hydropower it doesn't have it. But when I was in operation, I was doing projects in Laos. Laos is about 4 million people. Nepalese are 20 plus people, 25. They have more talents than Laos, but they are not able to put the hydropower for energy needs. Laos does it. You got $2 billion, $3 billion investment, private sector put it. So some people don't want to learn. Then we cannot help. We can, with our knowledge, we can show them, look, you can take that track today. I had also brought about 20 of these people to see what Laos is doing. They go back, they don't do it, then there's only so much ADB can do. And what else was the, that's about it.
The reasonable time frame for those growth?
Korea, if you talk about Korea is one of the fastest we've ever seen in the history in Asia, at least. 30 to 40 years time they became from, I've been about 30 years in the bank, so that's a good indicator. 30 years ago, we still had loan project. In Korea, I was still going to see some loan projects. 4 decades. And this is one of the fastest track. And there's a lot of things you can learn from that. One thing I learned from, again, your question, nice question on what ADB can advise, especially strategy for the country. The country at the moment has too many political parties. There is no political, common understanding of what development we want to do. But if you look at, from your perspective, my perspective, what you need is energy, what you need is transport, what you need is education. And all you need to do is sit down and agree on that. That's exactly what Korea did back in the 60s. They brought all the oppositions, put them together, and said, today I'm Prime Minister, tomorrow you may be Prime Minister, day after, but our issues are still the same. These are national interests, and let's go and do it no matter what the Prime Minister. That's all they need to figure out. If only they agree, I think we can do a lot more. So and they can do themselves very good. Sorry for giving too much detail on this. Because we've been having lots of dialogue like this with the countries.
Well, you know, it's 7 o'clock, and by schedule we said we wouldn't keep you beyond 7. However, after this, we have refreshments and a reception in the room next door, and with the indulgence of our speakers, if you join us, there'll be a chance to ask your questions then. So let me close this by saying thank you. I think there's no need to summarize it. I think you have the reports before you. It's a good read. I agree with Suraj. It's a good read, and it's certainly enlightening many parts of it. On behalf of the Asian Institute of Management, let me thank our 2 presenters and 2 discussants, Bindu Lohani, Vice President for Knowledge Management at ADB, Shanti Jagannathan with the RSDD Department, Suraj with McKinsey, and Monim Ibrahim, who is with the Department of Science and Technology, the Information Communication Technology Office. I have some tokens for them. Thank you very much.